Welcome back to Sword of Laban. I've got here again Jeff Hale with me, and we'll be talking about how the wise men that visited the Christ child were probably Book of Mormon characters. So that's our wild claim. Jeff, we made a video about this last week. Can you go ahead and recap that video? And then this time, just for the audience sake, we're going to build on that and talk about the start of the journey and so forth. So go ahead, Jeff. What did we talk about last week?
Sure. This is all supposition, but it's all based on what we're reading in the scriptures, or what we're reading in the Bible, that little tiny bit that's in there, then also what's in the Book of Mormon. And Nephi has become one of my just all-time favorite prophets. The more I read about him, even before thinking about this, he just was so powerful. And so we basically make the and others have done this too, but we make the hypothesis that Nephi and his brother Lehi and possibly Samuel the Lamanite might have had the opportunity and taken that opportunity to travel to the old world and visit Jesus Christ when he was a baby. And they might have been those three wise men, or that might have been the wise men. Three of them, and they might have brought a whole bunch of others. And there's a lot of signs in the Book of Mormon that point to this, just with the timing, with the ability to do it, with their the ability to make ships, the path they would have traveled. All this is just there in the Book of Mormon, just kind of waiting for someone to open up and say, here it is. You guys want it? Take a look at it. And we're just looking for one little bit of information that to really kind of connect everything between the old world and the new world, Book of Mormon and the New Testament. But I wanted to just kind of say a little bit more about Nephi, because he is one of my favorite prophets there. And I just love learning about him, knowing about him, and just kind of his character. I just go through a few things really quickly, and this is all in the Book of Helaman. And starting in chapter 5, we learn about him teaching, him being taught by his dad, saying, this is why we gave you that name, Nephi and Lehi. And then he goes through that. Then he goes, and with that knowledge, he remembers what his dad has said. He remembers who Jesus Christ is and who he's been taught. And so he and Lehi go, and they teach the Lamanites. They teach the Lamanites, their enemies, and they convert an army of the Lamanites, 8,000 of them. They teach the Nephite apostates, and they become converted. And that's, as we learned earlier in the Book of Mormon, a really tough thing to do. But he has success in doing so. We learn about that he then, in the Book of Helaman, chapter 8, he talks about his passion for who Jesus Christ was and who the prophets are. And he goes and he says, he kind of compares himself to Moses, as he's saying, hey, Moses smote the rock and water came out of it, and God gave him power to do that. And he parted the Red Sea, and he had this power to do it. And he says, if God gave unto this man such power, then why should ye dispute among yourselves and say that he hath given unto me no power, whereby I may know of concerning the judgments that shall come upon you, except you repent? So in other words, he's saying, I am a lot like Moses. And then he goes on and he says, all the prophets testified of Jesus Christ. And in fact, he stays a little bit more on Moses, and talks about the serpent that Moses raised up, wherein if the people would just look at the serpent, they would live. And he says, and as many as should look upon that serpent should live, even so as many should look upon the Son of God with faith, having a contrite spirit, might live even unto that life which is eternal. So he knows that if I just look upon Christ, I can live. Kind of metaphorically, but he might be thinking it literally as well. And then he goes on and talks about all the prophets that testified of Jesus Christ. And he goes in and says Zenos and Zenoch and Isaiah and Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lehi, Nephi, and he's just so filled with all these people know of Jesus Christ. They all testify of Jesus Christ. He knows about them. He's then given he prophesies of the death of the chief judge, and then he prophesies of the murder and the confession of the murder. He then is given the sealing power, and God says, whatever you want, I'll give it to you, because you're not going to ask for anything that's contrary to my will. So Nephi has that power given to him. He then goes and he prays that there will be a famine in the land, and there's a famine in the land. After a couple of years, he prays that the famine will go away, and it goes away. He has this power. He then is kind of goes from city to city preaching, and at one point he teaches the people, and they don't like what he says, and he's conveyed out of the midst of them. So just over and over, Nephi has power. Nephi is an incredible testator of Jesus Christ. And if there's anybody who would want to see who Jesus Christ or see him in the flesh, I would think it was Nephi. Nephi has always harkened back to him. He's proven time and time again that, he has the miracles happen to him. He has the miracles performed for him, and he's just fearless. He's fearless. He's faithful. He goes and he lives in the land northward. He comes back. He goes here and there. He's a wanderer, and that's what we learned about him. And so that's the idea that maybe he would wander across continents. It kind of hits home, and kind of something that I would think that he would do. So
Totally.
Anyway, so that's who I think Nephi is, and I love Nephi for that, and I want to be a lot like him if I could.
Yeah, it definitely fits his character profile, right? And then also, I hadn't put that together before, that Nephi compared himself to Moses, who, the iconic scene of crossing the Red Sea. Well, the original Lehi and Nephi and Sam and the others that came across in 600 BC, they too thought of themselves as like Moses on an Exodus. They were leaving a wicked society. They were crossing an ocean. They were going towards the land of promise. And, if Nephi is in the mindset of that he's comparing himself to a Moses, he might be also thinking about returning by the same method. So that's really fascinating.
Yeah. To even further that a little bit, he even says in part of his prophesying, when he's given that sealing power, he kind of warns the people and says, hey, if God commands me to open up this sea, I can open up the sea. I can make this sea, the water go away, and there'll be just dry land here. And I wonder if in the back of his mind, he's like, and then I could cross the water so I could just walk on the, he doesn't know, but he's compared himself to Moses in a few different ways. And he compares that Moses believes in Jesus Christ, and so does he. And so do I.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure that if he did cross the waters in a boat, then the words that his father gave him in Helaman chapter 5 about the storms and the tempest and so forth, they would have come to mind. So you began by talking about the sort of the timeline leading up to the disappearance. So you've recapped that really well. I've just got a couple slides here. These are just from last year, from the videos that I made last year. I'll leave a link in the description below to the full videos if you want to get in even more nerdy details. But we have here, this is the 86th year of the reign of the judges. Samuel the Lamanite prophesies and then disappears, or he goes back to his homeland and is never heard from again. And then there's the 87th year. It just talks about pride, iniquity, up to the 89th year. In the 90th year, we've got signs and wonders, angels. It mentions wise men right here in verse 14. We talked about that last time. Glad tidings of great joy, and the scriptures being fulfilled. In the 91st year, Nephi departed. And then the 92nd year, the prophecies are fulfilled more fully. In the 92nd year, sometime in that year, is the day-night-day sequence and the star. So that's sort of, Nephi's leaving maybe a year or two prior. We talked about that earlier, but that's sort of the timing and how that all lines up. Okay, so maybe let's talk a little bit about the star. And every Christmas card ever that has pictured the star has shown it as this bright beacon in the sky that's sort of blinding to look at. Sometimes it's casting down a spotlight onto the ground. And certainly that may have been the case, but you would expect it to have been recorded by a lot of civilizations if that's the case. So let's look at the Book of Mormon to see if we can get anything more about what the star was like. So this is in Helaman 14, where Samuel the Lamanite is prophesying that there shall be a day and a night and a day, as if it were one day, and there were no night. And this shall be unto you for a sign. And then it talks about what that looks like in terms of like the sun goes down, but it's still, the sky is still light. And then in verse 5, it says, and behold, like almost as an afterthought, not related to the brightness of the sky, and behold, there shall a new star arise, such an one as you never have beheld. So it's not saying the star arising is causing the brightness of the sky. In fact, the timing of its rising isn't necessarily dusk, right? It's just, it arises sometime during the night and it's a new star. So putting that together with the fact that we don't have a record of a bright star in the sky at that time from the civilizations that should have recorded such a thing, we have to conclude that either the star was not a star and it was something local like ball lightning or an angel or something like that. Or we could just take them at their word and say it was a star. The Book of Mormon was right. It was a star, but it was not a big star, right? It was a star, the sort of star that you wouldn't notice unless you were looking in a specific location in the sky. And if you knew to look in a specific constellation, then you would notice it. Otherwise, the rest of the world would not notice it. And that kind of fits as well because the star was visible in the New World. And then, by the way, the wise men didn't follow the star until they reached Jerusalem. It just says they saw a star and then they show up in Jerusalem. So they're not following the star. They just saw it and then they show up in Jerusalem. But in Jerusalem,
And
a few
then
miles from
you could
Bethlehem,
say you could say maybe they're following it just in the sense that hey, we saw that there was a star, and so we're following the sign and the sign of a star. We're following that because the star came. We're following it, not necessarily we're going that way or that way. We're just following the fact that there's a star. So
right, maybe following a
could,
commandment.
you could say that.
Yeah,
hmm
I guess my point is the Bible never says they were following it to reach Jerusalem. It only
Not
says
until
they
Jerusalem.
saw it and they showed up. And then it says they followed it to Bethlehem. So there's a few different pointers there. Of course, as we think about stars, you don't really follow a star. So it's probably, like you said, it's a sign. Maybe it's a sign that shows timing. So when the star appears, that's the time to set out. It's not a sign that shows direction, right? So maybe it's a time-based thing and not a space-based thing, like a direction-based thing.
Yeah.
But then they do follow it from Jerusalem to Bethlehem. So if that's the case, then it's in the southern sky because to follow a star from Jerusalem south, slightly west, like south-southwest to a few miles to Bethlehem, then it has to be south. If the Bible is right and they're following it, then it's going to be in the southern sky. We also should look. One more thing is in 3rd Nephi 1. This is the fulfillment of Samuel Lamanites prophecies that we read in the previous verses. And here, the orange stuff is all about the day and the night and the day, right? There's a lot of orange stuff. And then in the middle is interspersed, lift up your head and be of good cheer, for now I come into the world, and so forth. But at the very end, just as kind of an afterthought, it came to pass also that a new star did appear according to the word. So the star is not a big, bright, shining beacon, or it's unlikely to be a shining beacon. It's probably a message that has been transmitted from God to prophets saying, hey, look in this patch of sky, and when you see a star appear in exactly this location, it's time to go. It's time to set out, and you'll make it on time. Actually, they didn't make it on time, but many people think they arrived 2 years late. We'll probably talk about that next time. I think they arrived a lot earlier than that. Certainly late, but not 2 years. So should we have some fun now? I can pull up this software here and look at where it might have been. If we're looking in the southern sky, in order they can follow it
Jerusalem.
from Jerusalem. Yeah, they're sitting in Jerusalem. Right now, I've set the location to Jerusalem on Stellarium Web. And by the way, if you try this yourself, then there's a weird quirk where you have to set your computer's time zone to Jerusalem before you open this page. If you don't do that, the daytime will be wrong. But anyway, so here we are in Jerusalem, and I've set it to 1 AD, and that's just because it doesn't go to negative numbers. But we're going to go with it because within a few years, the stars haven't moved around. And we're going to be looking south, right over here. And there's a curious constellation in the southern hemisphere. By the way, what I'm about to show, it doesn't hinge upon the wise men being Lehites. It doesn't hinge upon that theory. And
True.
And the wise men being Lehites doesn't hinge upon this. This is sort of a separate parallel thing. But if we are to understand that the star is in the southern sky in order to lead them so they can follow from Jerusalem to Bethlehem, and if we are to understand that it's probably not a big shining beacon, it's probably just a little star, we might ask ourselves where might it have showed up. There's one other curious detail though, because sorry, I really like talking about this, but it says that the star came and stood over where the young child was. And before sort of looking into this, I really thought that was kind of odd because I studied astronomy in college. I ended up majoring in physics, but like stars don't stand over anything, right? So that means it had to be an angel or it had to be some supernatural phenomenon that's not actually a star, that's many light years away. Because the star just kind of sweeps out an arc evenly in the sky, and the ones closer to the ecliptic will sweep out a bigger arc, and the ones closer to the poles will sweep out a smaller arc. But stars don't stand over anything; they don't stop for anyone. But um, there is a constellation called the Southern Cross, which is a very bright constellation, which is visible from Jerusalem at this time, and it's visible in the night sky as a constellation that would be recognized by the Nephites, because remember, at least 8 times in the Book of Mormon it talks about how they knew Jesus Christ would be crucified. They knew he would be crucified, and if we had to understand that they understood about the cross, then they would have recognized this as something significant. It would have been the perfect place for God to put a star. This would explain how a star can stand over something, right? A point can't really stand over something, but a cross, a crucifix shape in the sky, can certainly stand over the southern point. So that's all to say, like, if we kind of run this forward and backwards, then the Southern Cross here, these very bright 4 stars, as we go from right here, this is sunset over to sunrise. The Southern Cross kind of rises and stands directly. If you were standing in Jerusalem, you would see this south, slightly southwest, and it would be something that would lead you straight to Bethlehem. So I thought that was kind of cool. If you want more detail, we can go into it more in a video. I've got last year's video, so go ahead and click on the link in the description below where I go into that in even more detail. So maybe that aside,
just another interesting thing that that I just think about because I got nothing better to do, I guess, is they refer to the star. The wise men refer to the star as, we have seen his star in the east. Where's the King of the Jews? It's his star. We've seen his star in the east. And that's interesting that they attribute that star to him, and they kind of imply that everyone knows it's a star. Well, I don't know what they're implying, but to me, it feels like they're implying that, yeah, you should know that this is the star that everyone knows is what's signifying the birth of the King of the Jews. And I don't know where they got that exactly. And it seems like Herod either overlooks it or just says, okay, whatever, but who is this? And then later, when they talk about the star in verses 9 and 10 of Matthew chapter 2, it says that, like you said, that it went before them till it came and stood over where the young child was. And so we've gone over exactly like, okay, well, maybe that the cross there was what it was. And then I find it interesting that in the next verse it says, when they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceedingly great joy. That kind of catches me as a little odd, because they've seen the star, they seem to have followed it for a while, and then now they rejoice exceedingly when they see it again. But did it appear and disappear? Was it there? Was it not? Well, I mean, why would, I don't know? Just as odd. One of those questions I don't think I have an answer to, and I don't have a good. Maybe I could just refute what you're saying and saying that, yeah, it was a star and the star moved, but stars don't move. Yeah, but God can do what he wants. Mm-hmm. So maybe it's that, and that is why they rejoice exceedingly. Yeah, maybe. I don't know that I believe that, but it's just odd the way they kind of say, we're following the star, and then they follow the star to Bethlehem, and then they say, yeah, and oh, there it is. Let's rejoice exceedingly. You'd seen it earlier. Oh, I don't know. I also think about this in terms of, this is Matthew writing this supposedly, right? So how did he hear this story? And who did he hear it from? So I don't know, but I like to think about that. Who told him the story, and how many people were told the story? Mm-hmm. Was it something that Mary had told him just in passing, or that is one of the stories they told over and over? Oh yeah, on the night that Jesus was born, this is what happened. And then a couple years later, this is what happened. And then he goes and puts it to words. I don't know, but I like to think about that and wonder how many other stories we're missing, because he's the one who chose to include the wise men. Nobody else did.
Yeah, absolutely. I have an answer for why they might have seen it and then not seen it and then seen it again.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure if it's correct, okay. But if it is in the southern sky, then remember when you're in the northern hemisphere that the southern sky kind of just peaks up above the horizon and goes back down again. And right now, here I'm April 6th. In the videos I made last year, I really thought April 6th was the correct date for the birth. I don't know, but I do kind of hold to a springtime date. So here we can
Mhm.
change the date to here February 6th. Basically, the Southern Cross. And by the way, I'm not saying that the Southern Cross was the star. I'm saying that this would have been a perfect
Yeah.
location to place a star, like right in the center or something. And so I guess my point is, like in the springtime here, from about what are we in February, you can still see it. January, you can still see it. December, you can still see it. So for about 4 months of the year, you can see it, and other than that, you can't see it because it's swinging out a giant
Mm.
circle around the South Pole down here. So they'd been traveling for 1 to 2 years. They saw it at the outset. They traveled, and at some point, the Southern Cross dipped below the horizon for all nighttime hours. So at that time, it was only above the horizon in daytime hours, right? Because for most of its arc, it's below the horizon, and so it's invisible. And it's only a few months of the year that you can see it in a few hours of the night. And so they may have,
Mm.
lost track of it for months and months. They may have also gone quite far north and come back down south because the further north you go, the less you can see of this. And I'll also point out that today you can't see the Southern Cross in the city of Jerusalem because of the precession of Earth's axis. The axis of Earth has actually changed direction slightly, and this is below the horizon now. But 2,000 years ago, it was visible. So, yeah, it's all to say it may have
Interesting.
had done with where they came. They may have come north and lost sight of it, or they may have just lost sight of it because it was under the horizon for nighttime hours, and um, the sky was blue when they should have been able to see it. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I
few
like
thoughts.
there's some science behind that. That's good.
Yeah, exactly. And if it wasn't this, then and it was something else in the southern sky, well, certainly they could have. It could have been any star in any location, but this seems apt, right? It seems to be the
Yeah.
kind of place that you could put a star and make it meaningful. And here are just some verses where I've pulled together where it talks about how the Nephites knew that Jesus would be crucified. This is prior to Christ coming. So here in First Nephi 19, I've underlined the words. Second Nephi 25, Mosiah 3, Mosiah 15, Second Nephi 6, Second Nephi 10. So it was well known that they would be crucified. Now, we don't find artwork of crucifixes, of course, in any ancient America site. So I would suspect that this is probably something that was known just to prophets, and that if it was known more widely, perhaps it might have been it may have been corrupted. So it may have just been kept to prophets.
Yeah. And then when did the crucifixions begin? When was the invention of the crucifixions? And so maybe they didn't, and maybe it's a translation that Joseph Smith had that they said it in a different way, and he
Hmm.
went back to it was crucify is the way he said it. So it could be exactly what you're saying. It could also be that it was just a term that they used then that we don't have, and it would have been something completely different, but matches crucify.
Yeah, we can't know how much of this was translation, sort of insertion
Uh-huh.
versus actual truth. Yeah, that the ancients knew. So let's maybe talk about which way they might have gone. I think it's interesting because it says wise men came from the east, and so how would that actually
Hmm.
work here? I've drawn out kind of three possibilities. One is across the Pacific, which it kind of makes a lot more sense to hug the coastline than to go straight, and it's not quite as long as it seems on a globe because, of course, going around this way is nearly the same length as going straight across the Pacific, but you can stop off for supplies and so forth. But this path number one here, either landing up here in Kuwait or going up the Red Sea, um, these would have been. This is one possibility. It's also the longest possibility. Possibility number two would be to leave out in the Atlantic and go either through the Straits of Gibraltar, through the Mediterranean, or path number three would be around the continent of Africa here. So I'm not really sure, but just for fun, I kind of compared these. If we want these wise men to come to Jerusalem from the east, then two would not qualify, whereas one and three would. Where one is coming from the east, three would be coming from the east for the
Hmm.
last portion, and two would not. And I won't go through these in detail. You can pause and take a look if you like. But suffice it to say, it's not entirely clear to me which way they went, but the most check marks for me, at least, kind of fall on the side of one here, which is also the longest path. And you mentioned last time that you thought, well, based upon Nephi's personality, if he is going to be traveling to see the Christ child across an entire planet, what did you say? Like you think he would probably anytime he stopped
Yeah,
off, he would. Yeah,
his
go ahead.
yeah, I think that he is. I mean, his character is one that he taught about Christ all over the place. He prophesied and he taught, and that's what he did, and he loved doing. He went everywhere, and he didn't care if they were the the chief judge. He'd go prophesy against him, and he'd talk with him. He didn't care if they were the people coming from Samuel the Lamanite to be baptized. He'd talk with them. And that's what he did, and so he talked with his enemies as well. And his great uncle was one of those that went away in the ship with Hagoth, I believe. Was it Corianton, I believe? Or I think that's who it was. And so he went in one of those ships. And so he's got this idea in his mind that these people are out there. And all it takes is for him to say a prayer and say, which way should I go? And I want to teach as many people. And I would think he'd want to go find those people who went away with Hagoth, because he knows they already have Nephite blood in them or Lehite blood in them. So they have some record of this, and he wants to go remind, just like he wanted to go remind the people of the North, and he went and taught them. So I think he would go along the route that would take him through there. And I was just reading about the people of Hagoth. There's a BYU article on it that says we don't know exactly. There's no church stance on who their descendants were, but there's a few prophets along the way. Spencer W. Kimball and a number of others. I mean, Spencer W. Kimball said in 1976 that that the people of New Zealand, that they are Hagoth's people, is what he told them. And he says, and it seems clear to me that your ancestors moved northward and crossed the South Pacific, or moved northward and crossed the South Pacific. So if they crossed the South Pacific to get to New Zealand, and then maybe all the Polynesian islands, I wouldn't be surprised if that's also the route that Nephite says, I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to teach them along the way. So that'd be one of those things that would say route number one is one of the, or route number one dashed is one of those that I believe in.
Yeah, fair enough. And in fact, it's really interesting to me because I told this theory to someone once, someone who's Latter-day Saint, and they expressed doubt that somebody could make a journey like this back in those times. And I'm thinking, okay, several things. Number one, 600 years prior, the reverse journey through one of these paths happened, yes. Right? Probably this was an easier case. Now we got like technology that's 600 years more advanced. We've got bigger teams of people. We've got Hagoth Incorporated that's building big ships and shipping numerous people north, as opposed to the original 600 BC journey that was just a few people building a boat on a beach, right? So it's far more probable that this reverse journey happened than the original journey. And if you believe the original journey, like this one seems to be easier to understand.
Absolutely.
I've got one other data point here is I kind of wondered how long this would take, because by my calculation, they left, or Nephi disappeared sometime between 1 and 24 months prior to Christ's birth. And my best guess is between 4 and 15 months. And so, does the length of these journeys match? It's difficult to say because we don't exactly know what kinds of boats, etc. But, well, a while ago, there was a boat called the Phoenician that sailed along this path right here. They created this boat with replicas of ancient Phoenician hand tools, and they sailed this ancient style boat right across the Atlantic. And the point was to prove transoceanic contact between continents. It averaged about 50 miles a day. But if we apply this to one of these three paths, we get a length of anywhere from like 1 year to half a year to 1 year, depending on which path was taken. So the timing seems to line up if we assume that 50-mile a day type of speed. So I thought that was interesting. But there's one other detail and this is, by the way, a lot of these details are in a book called From the East. I'll leave a link in the description below. I don't know the author or anything, but it's a great book. It covers a lot of these things. I think we brought up a few new points, but one point which I'm not sure about yet, but I recently discovered, and I think it's cool. So I'm going to say it anyway, even though I'm not sure if it means anything. But if we take a look here, this word from the East, or Anatoly, I'm sorry. And this means a rising or a dawn or day spring. And by extension, it means the East. But also it has a second meaning. It means branch or sprout. And this is used in the Septuagint in 4 places in the Old Testament. So basically, the Septuagint translators were going along. This is before 200 years before Christ. Septuagint translators were going along in Jeremiah and Zechariah, and they knew Hebrew and they knew Greek in 200 BC, and they come across this word branch, and it doesn't mean just a branch of a tree. It's a prophetic use of the word branch. So, for example, down here in one of these verses, it says, "Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will raise unto David a righteous branch." And they look at this word in Hebrew called branch, and they write down the word anatolen, which is the same Greek
Hmm.
word used here and from the East. Now, there is a word for branch in Greek. It's the word klados, right? And that's a literal branch of a tree. It's like in Matthew, I think chapter, I think it's chapter 12, where it talks about the mustard seed growing and the birds roosting in the branches of the tree. And it's used other times in the New Testament, this word klados. But that's not the word that the Septuagint translators chose. They chose this word anatolen, which is curious because it's only used in this sense in sort of a prophetic sense. So I don't know if this holds any weight, and I fully agree that there is there are zero English translations of the New Testament that will translate this from the branch, because if you're talking about people that are traveling from somewhere, the natural translation is east. But it is
Direction.
curious that maybe there's something in the mind of the ancient writer where they were using this in terms of the same sense that the Septuagint writers were talking about, like a prophetic use of the word branch. And in that case, these would be wise men from the prophetic sense branch, that sort of a branch of the house of Israel, which the Nephites were kind of obsessed with, right? They're always talking about how they had the branch broken off, and Jacob 5 and many prophets throughout the Book of Mormon talk about branches. And then Isaiah talks about the branch growing over the wall, which we consider to mean the Nephites. So a curious thing, something to think about. Um,
I
I
like
don't know.
that. I like. I obviously I didn't. I'd never heard this before either. So Anatolia is kind of a neat thing, and it makes me think of one of the other my other thought on the whole idea that these might have been Lehites, Nephi's, Lehi and Sam, come or Samuel and Elimelech. It I think about this in terms of just very broad, that there's a few things there in the Book of Mormon that I just think, why is this in there? Why would he even mention Hagoth? It doesn't make any sense. There's limited amount of space. Why bring him up at all? Why bring up that Nephi disappeared? Why not just say, okay, we're on to the next Nephi? And then why bring it up later that he still hasn't come back 6, 7 years later, 9 years later, whatever it was? There's no reason to bring this unless there's going to be some sort of, we're trying to make some sort of link at some point for the future. I mean, to me, it reminds me of the when Christ does come and he says to the people, "At no time did I tell the people in Jerusalem that you guys are here, except when I told them that other sheep I have, which are not of this fold, and them also, et cetera, et cetera." So he kind of left that breadcrumb for them in Jerusalem that they didn't follow, but it was there, right there for them. And so I think, has he left a few breadcrumbs in here for us too? And some of those are like, look, I told you about Hagoth. Why would I bring that up? Why did why would you think I put that in there? Why would you think I'd put in there? I called the people who the angels appeared unto wise men, not just men, wise men. Why do you think I brought that up? And why do you think I brought a few of these things up? So when I think about that, I think one day, what if we do get the record? It's prophesied that we'll get the record of we'll have the record of the Jews, we'll have the record of the Nephites, and we'll have the record of the lost tribes. There'll be those records. What if you get those records, and those records then just perfectly bridge or marry the Book of Mormon to the Bible? And how could they do that? Well, through a journey of Nephi, Lehi, and Samuel Lamanite. If they came across from the Americas, went over to Jerusalem, and along the way they saw the branch the lost tribes, and they talked with them, including Hagoth or including anybody else, and they wrote it down, and then all of a sudden it comes together. It's like, oh yeah, now everything just fits here perfectly together, which might not happen till the second coming. Maybe it doesn't happen till many years, or maybe it never happens. Maybe this is all just I mean, we're supposed to think about it, but maybe it's just there to help us study the scriptures more. I don't know. It's
Yeah,
working for me.
can you imagine what would it be like if this record came forth, right? So Nephi, the great record keeper, he's gonna show up in Jerusalem, and then he's just gonna never write anything down again for the rest of his life. Like, come on, he's gonna write this
Yeah.
down. He's come to see the Christ child, and
Yeah.
he's gonna write down exactly how it went down, and connect that back to ancient prophecies and so forth. We don't have that record, right? So if this theory is true, then Nephi would have written it down. Therefore, there is a record somewhere that will come to light, whether it's before the millennium or after. At some point, if this theory is true, we'll find out about. We'll probably receive Nephi's record. And can you imagine what that would do to unite Christendom? To be able
Yeah.
to like show that connection between the Book of Mormon and the Bible. I'm skeptical that it will
I
happen
always
because
wonder about
that's
that.
not how usually these things usually go down. But it would be awesome if it did, right?
Yeah. I always wonder that about. I mean, we as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we understand that there's a lot that God has revealed that um, that is missing, or that the Bible is missing parts of it. And people say, no, the sola scriptura, that's all you can believe in. What if we did find those? Even if these even if the wise men, I keep saying three wise men, sorry, but even if the wise men were not Nephites, Lehites, what if there was somebody else? What if we found their record? Would they just discard that? No, no, no. It can't be true because it's not in the Bible. Why
Absolutely,
not?
yeah.
There was a prophecy that they followed. We need to know what that prophecy was. Well, it's not important. It's incredibly important. We want to know what it was, and if we had it, oh, we'd just rejoice. That'd be great. And if it ended up being Lehites that had that prophecy and visited, what a great bridge between, like you said, all Christianity and just all Christianity everywhere. I don't know that it would convince many people. I think it just like I don't think signs convince anybody. And if you prove this correctly, I don't think people would look at it like, oh, I guess this is all now true. No, it still takes faith. It still takes study and prayerful consideration to know if these things are true.
Yeah, it does. But one thing I like about it, and this is to echo something you said a minute ago, is I love that this theory explains some things that are not otherwise easily explainable. Like you said, why did they include details XYZ in the Book of Mormon? Like why Hagoth's ships were mentioned, why it says the words wise men. And then here's another example in Isaiah 60, and maybe we'll wrap it up after this. There's actually a lot more to talk about, so we should do a third video next week, but about like the arrival and what happened when they arrived. But let's read through this because people have wondered for millennia, 2 millennia, who these wise men were, and even without the Book of Mormon, I don't think you can read Isaiah 60 and conclude that these were just some Persian space wizards, right? These are people from across the sea. So let's read it. Like this, Isaiah 60 is so clearly about the birth of the Son of God, so clear, and yet they come across the sea. So let's read it. Arise, shine, for thy light has come. The darkness shall cover the earth. This is talking about, and then Gentiles shall come to thy light. So it talks about light and then darkness and then light. Maybe that's the day, night, day. Or maybe I'm reading too much into it. But let's keep reading. And kings will come to the brightness of thy rising. And thy sons shall come from far, right? Persia is not far. I'm sorry. It takes a couple of weeks on a camel and you're there. So it's not far. Well, I mean, okay, everything's relative. Maybe it's far for relative to the next town over, but I don't think that's what Isaiah is saying when he's using these great grand terms here. And they shall bring gold and incense. And who are these that fly as a cloud and as doves to their windows? And that's a reference to Noah's Ark when he sent out the dove, and then the dove came back to the window, and the clouds, and it's just bringing up all this kind of ship imagery. Surely the isles,
when they're flying, is that a great big sail that would look like a cloud?
Yeah, absolutely.
Who knows?
Surely the isles shall wait for me, and the ships of Tarshish first, to bring thy sons from far, their silver and their gold with them, unto the name of the Lord thy God, and to the Holy One of Israel. So even if you don't believe in the Book of Mormon, this kind of blows the theory that these are just some Persians who wandered over, kind of out of the water, right? Even if they're Chinese, it's kind of, no, I think they came by ship. If we're going to even rely upon just the Bible. And the Nephites seem like a possibility. Now, some people will say, okay, maybe they weren't Persians, maybe they were these Jews. That Jews went into exile, and there was pockets of Jews everywhere, or all around uh, modern day
Yeah.
Europe and modern day Asia, and that's probably true. And if we had a record from them with bullseye prophecies about the star and bullseye prophecies about timing and location, I'd probably put some more weight into that theory too. But we don't. But we do have one
Yeah.
record that has extremely detailed prophecies and that dates before the time of Christ. I'm not talking about like a medieval manuscript that kind of retroactively writes back the story of the wise men. Like the story of the wise men is already known, and then somebody writes some fan fiction. Like Book of Mormon is not fan fiction. It predates the Christ. They have bullseye prophecies. Is really the only culture that we know of where we can reliably date the text before Christ, and they knew everything they needed to know, and they had all the ships
The
and the
resources.
resources that they would need. So I don't know why we would even hypothesize that it's just another pocket of Israelites. It may have been,
Yeah.
but there's no evidence whatsoever for that. So anyway, maybe we
The
should leave it
greatest
there.
evidence seems to be them.
Yeah,
The greatest evidence seems to be the Nephites, the people of Lehi. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. So we got a lot more to talk about next time. I think that'll be the third and possibly final time we talk about this. But please leave a comment below. Until next time, this is Sort of Laban and Jeff out.